I am not a fan of Ubisoft, mostly because everything they make are either too difficult, too boring, or too broken. Pretty much the only thing I tolerate from them is Far Cry, when it is actually done good. Because terrible stories aside, they are impressive open world playgrounds that give you the freedom to dick around in. There's a reason why Far Cry 5 is the greatest selling game in the series, because it is just chaotic fun. Other than that, Ubisoft does a lot, and I mean a lot, of dumb crap. Releasing multiple editions with hardly anything worth the price, laying off their employees, not giving a crap about player feedback, except for when realizing that their game really isn't historically accurate because they based their info off of a book that took info from Wikipedia articles, so they had to delay their inevitable failure of a game. Ubisoft Connect? Just everything about Ubisoft Connect? Infamously formerly known as Uplay. And then there's Assassin's Creed, Ubisoft's flagship franchise ever since the first game in 2007. I've purposely avoided this franchise because it really just does not look like my thing. My only experience with Assassin's Creed before this year was Black Flag on my cousin's PS3 when I was 14. 15? I don't remember, it was a long time ago. Anyway, I got bored of this game after 3 hours. Mostly because the first half of that 3 hours was filled with unskippable cutscenes, boring trailing missions, and this present-day Abstergo bullcrap. It wasn't until the game set me loose that I actually had fun. I mostly ran around the first open city doing all of the side stuff and knocking enemies off the rooftops. Over, and over, and over, until there was nothing left. And when all that was left was to continue the story, I immediately shut off the PS3 and read a book instead. Ever since that experience, I never gave a passing glance at Assassin's Creed, and yet the knowledge of a new game never eludes me. It's always the same thing from me. Ugh, another Assassin's Creed game? But things have changed for me. I'm older, my taste in games has changed a great amount, I have matured. Therefore, once upon a time, namely 4 months ago, while I was browsing the PlayStation Store, I happened across the Assassin's Creed Legendary Collection, which is usually $200 by the way, pretty freaking ludicrous, but I caught it on sale for only $40. And it includes Black Flag, Rogue, Unity, Syndicate, Origins, and Odyssey all in one package. 6 games for less than $7 each? That was just a good deal. So I thought, screw it. I went from owning no Assassin's Creed games to 6 after one $40 purchase. And I played all of these games. Since then, I've only finished 2 of these games, because frankly, I'd rather do anything else with my life. But I thought it would be neat to make a video talking about my experiences with these games. Now, if you are a hardcore Assassin's Creed fan that loves these games, maybe go find another video because you might not like what I have to say. Don't get me wrong, there are some things to like about these games, and a lot, and I mean a lot, of things that made me grind my teeth. Everything in this video is entirely subjective, so just keep that in mind. And with that said, I would like to start off by talking about Queen Victoria Tea and Biscuits. The first game that I played was Assassin's Creed Syndicate. I didn't play these games in any particular order, but let me just say this. Don't expect me to go super into depth on the story, because the story is the weakest part of these games, alright? They're serviceable, and yes, they are inspired. These games feel the need to remind you every time you boot them up, but the stories just leave very little impact. Very few games can keep me engaged because of their stories, and Assassin's Creed really isn't one of them. And the story in Syndicate is honestly one of the dumbest. There are moments that can be convincing and sometimes humorous, but nothing sticks with me. And the characters really aren't any better, especially Jacob and Evie Fry. They just come across as stereotypical twin siblings that poke fun at each other. Plus, I find it awfully convenient that famous historical figures get mixed up in the plot. And the dumbest thing about the plot is Jacob having this power fantasy of running his own syndicate, as it were, even though he and Evie are already part of a gang per se. You're already in the Assassin's Brotherhood, just let me be an assassin, not a mob boss. Speaking of which, yes, you have AI gang members that can act as your companions at any point that you're doing world missions. And they suck. It takes an unbelievable amount of time for 5 people to kill one dude. Not even what the game is named for can do that right. Outside of story missions, there are district takeover missions and crowd events that constantly pop up. And the game offers you multiple different directions that you can tackle these missions. Sure, the same objectives constantly pop up, which is where the repetitiveness of Assassin's Creed shows itself, but you can still mostly do things how you want. Unlike Big Brother Rockstar Games, who constantly barges into the room to yell at you, "No, you can't go in that direction, mission failed." But in Syndicate, the repetitive side missions are practically forced upon you, because if you aren't a high enough level, you are too weak to do anything or even advance in the story. And you constantly have to do the same thing over and over and over just to see even an inch of progress. But the gameplay is where the game gives a musty shine, depending on how you look at it. Doing things stealthy is usually encouraged, but I enjoy direct fights almost just as much. There are 3 different kinds of weapons in the game: kukri knives, cane swords, and knuckle dusters. Personally, I enjoy using the cane swords because it looks like you're just bonking enemies over and over and kicking them in the nards until they die. And then there's the one thing that Syndicate has that no other AC game has done before or since, and that's the grapple gun. Some people love it, some people hate it. Me, personally, I like it. When I think of assassins, I think of hired fighters that sneak in, kill their contracted targets, and get out of there as fast as they can. Something like a grapple gun suits this, because they are a quick and easy way of getting out of a fight. You can scale any building and zipline between rooftops. The people that hate it say it ruins the parkour, but I use a mix of parkour and the grapple gun to get around. Out of all 6 games, this was one of the 2 that I had the most fun with traversal. 1868 London is honestly a perfect environment for parkour. That is, of course, if you can tolerate all the bugs, glitches, and technicalities that the game throws at you. One of the biggest draws to Syndicate is that there are 2 playable characters that you can swap between at any time. I played a fair amount as both, but I mostly enjoyed playing as Evie. The gimmick here is that Evie prefers a more stealthy approach, where Jacob is more confrontational. And yet they both have the same exact skill trees. I only played Syndicate for a good 15 hours, but I saw no difference between the 2 characters. You can be sneaky with Jacob and confrontational with Evie, and the game will be completely unaffected. And remember earlier when I said that you can pursue missions any way you want? I kinda told a half lie back there. One of the big rules in not just this game, but any Assassin's Creed game, is that you can't kill civilians. Nope, this person did not do that according to us at Ubisoft. No, you can't do that. That's it, Timmy, you're going in timeout. Assassins did not kill civilians. Meanwhile, here I am with Hitman, another game where you play as an assassin. And yet, Assassin's Creed Syndicate has a technicality when it comes to its own rules. And it all revolves around horse carriages. Carriages are the very first ground vehicles that players can use in an Assassin's Creed game. And they are very awkward to control. And if you ever need to get anywhere fast, it's pretty hard to not crash into things and cause chaos. Take, for example, this mission where Charles Darwin points Jacob in the direction of someone that knows something important, and when we hijack their carriage, we're supposed to damage the carriage to scare the guy into talking. So here I am, crashing the carriage into other carriages and walls, running over civilians in the process with absolutely zero repercussions. But one thing's for sure, I will always get a kick out of making an Englishman wet his bum. The next game that I played was Assassin's Creed Rogue. Even though the stories of these games are the weakest links, the story in Rogue has a somewhat interesting twist. The main character, Shay Cormac, starts to question the true motives of the Assassin's Brotherhood and, as the name implies, goes rogue and defects to the Templars, the sworn enemies of the Brotherhood. After that, you turn from an assassin to being an assassin hunter. Alright, okay.
Templar dog.
Are you gonna attack me yet? Parry! Ow. Attempt number 2. Time for the puckle gun. Heck yeah.
Me, traitor.
Wait, what? How did he die?
Trained you well.
How did he die? I have no idea what happened there.
You are quick, boy. Not very clever.
I'm sorry, what was that? Get back here. I didn't want this to be a trailing mission. Wait a minute. I have guns. Just shoot the guns. There, easy. The story is still filled with a lot of stupid, but it did at least go in a unique direction, and Rogue is the first of 2 Assassin's Creed games that I finished, mostly because it was very short. Yeah, Rogue is a very, very short game. It can take around 10 hours just to beat the main story, and because of how short the game is, the story is aggressively rushed. It's kinda hard to take this game way too seriously because of how fast you jump from one assassin hunt to another. And yep, historical figures are here for plot convenience. Wait, so you're telling me that it wasn't tuberculosis that killed Lawrence Washington, but an assassin that did it? And Benjamin Franklin was an accomplice of ours? What? Convoluted story aside, game is pretty fun. Sure, the copy-paste filler content and trailing missions aren't absent, and God, I hate those. Especially the Abstergo sections. I hate Abstergo for even existing. But as the game lets you loose, it's pretty open-ended. Because the game and story is incredibly short, it's much faster to get you into the fun parts. There is not just large urban areas, but island and jungle environments for you to explore, and plenty of enemy forts to keep you occupied. But there are 3 gameplay elements in Rogue that are especially enjoyable. One is that I feel like Rogue has some of the more creative weapons for you to use. My favorite are the rope darts, because you can pull enemies closer to you, like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat, or you can freaking hang enemies with them from a high elevation. Good lord, that is gruesome, yet awesome. 2, the Stalkers. After a certain point in the story, there are enemies called Stalkers that can jump you out of nowhere. If you're not careful, they can take you out in one hit. Which is why you need to listen for whispers, watch for a pink vignette on the screen, and use eagle vision to see where a nearby stalker could be lurking. This can seem annoying to most players, but I honestly find it fun to one-up stalkers at their own game. Oh, thought you had me, did you? You can't sneak up on me. You can't beat me, I'm in your mind. And then there's the one thing that made this game and Black Flag loved by many, and that's the naval combat. Being the captain of your own ship on the high seas and firing upon other ships? Everyone that has played this game can agree that this is pretty badass. Switching between cannons and mortars and maybe ramming into an enemy ship for good measure. Oh, this is so much fun. And when you weaken a ship enough and pull up beside it, you and your crew can board it, facing the enemy ship's crew in a small arms fight. And it's awesome! Despite all the repetitive missions and the sometimes clunky combat, everyone that has played Black Flag and Rogue can agree that the naval combat is the best part. This game has its ups and downs, especially its downs, and no one can deny that, but Rogue was honestly a huge leap in fun compared to Syndicate for me. And it made me wonder if the later games that awaited me after it were only going to get better. Right? I'll take the awkward silence as a yes. Meanwhile, even though the story is very rushed and Sweet Armstrong on a gorilla Abstergo was run by the Templars the whole time and I hated that, but Rogue does have an awesome ending because it ends where the next game starts. And this game conveniently came out on the same day as Unity. That is real. I am not kidding. Oh boy. Unity was pretty infamous after release with all of its bugs and glitches and performance issues and whatnot. Granted, I am playing this game 10 years later, so those glitches were pretty much non-existent. Most of the time. And this is the second Assassin's Creed game that I finished. The story in Unity was incredibly mid, but there was only one thing about it that was okay, and that's the relationship between the main character Arno and his love interest Elise. They have such a believable chemistry that it was the most entertaining part of the story on screen. That is, until about 1 hour into the game when Elise is revealed to be a member of the Templars. You know, the sworn enemy of the Assassin's Brotherhood. At that moment, the gears in my head went into overdrive and I could already predict what was going to happen later in the game. Spoiler warning if you really do care about that kind of thing, but this game has been out for 10 years, so I don't really care. Yeah, Elise dies, but not by Arno's hand. That's the part that surprised me. It was kinda hard to be invested in this relationship when the outcome was incredibly predictable. And that's how I would summarize Unity's story. Predictable. The overall ending isn't even that satisfying. And I know that this takes place in Paris during the French Revolution, but I never understood how the execution of King Louis XVI factors into the whole plot. What next? Arno gets a meetup with Napoleon Bonaparte or something? Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Napoleon doesn't even impact the game in any way. He's only involved in 2 missions, and once again, it's a historical figure that's just there for plot convenience. While I would say that, like always, the gameplay is the best factor of the game, it's not saying much. Combat honestly feels more clunky and shallow compared to Rogue. Copy-paste content is multiplied by 500, progression system practically encourages you to do the copy-paste content just to unlock better gear, but that takes forever, so Ubisoft tries to shove microtransactions down your throat. Seriously, why does this single-player game even have microtransactions in the first place? And the side missions are unsatisfying pieces of garbage. Steal from the target. Okay, sounds simple enough. And that was the whole mission. Then I killed him anyway.
I am the Chevalier d'Eon, Master Swordsman.
But you look like a female NPC.
Do not be confused by my attire. I simply prefer to clothe myself in female garb.
A duel? Ooh, that sounds fun.
Can't stop us. Enough.
Okay, I win. Easy win. Same song and dance where I'll win in less than a second. Yep.
I shall never yield.
Oh my, the judge is attacking me. Interesting development. Alright, judge down. Not too hard. So here we are at the final boss.
I am one of Europe's greatest swordsmen. Bravo! You have bested the best.
Oh wow, how did I ever predict this outcome? The side missions are a joke and are not fun in the slightest. And the game isn't privy to not including trailing missions. Oh, here's a trailing mission, but instead you're following a hot air balloon. That's different, right? But I did also try the online co-op multiplayer, and that wasn't very fun either. It was even more janky and clunky, and it didn't work very well. And my internet connection wasn't the problem, my internet works just fine. With all of that said, would I say that Unity is a bad game? Not at all. There are a lot of things to complain and even rage about, but there's a few things to find entertaining. Remember during the Syndicate segment where I mentioned that that game was one of the 2 games that has the best parkour mechanics? Unity is that second game. There is no grapple gun, but the parkour is just so much fun in this game. It's fun running across the rooftops of Paris. It's fun to assassinate fools with your hidden blades. It's fun sometimes to observe the stupid NPCs. And what's this now? I'm climbing Notre Dame, hanging out with my friends, the gargoyles from Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame.
All right. Pour the wine and cut the cheese.
There are times when the parkour doesn't work very well, like inside confined spaces, such as inside buildings and the sewers. But if you're willing to look past the bugs, the predictable story, and the filler side missions, Unity is perhaps what defines an Assassin's Creed game. And like I said, Arno and Elise's relationship is the one thing in the story that works for me. It is fun to play, yet annoying at the same time, which is less than what can be said about the next game that I tackled. And it's back to where it all started for me. Black Flag. Typical trailing missions? Yup. Unskippable cutscenes? Check. Abstergo getting in the way of your fun?
Edward, the pirate.
Yar, matey.
Definitely. Knocking fools off the roof. Yup, it's still there. But I had the tolerance to play it further than I did when I was a teenager, far enough to actually unlock the naval combat. And yep, it was just as fun as Rogue. It took a lot longer to get to it because of how bloated the opening chapter is, but it was nice to get out of the opening city and actually get out into the world. And the world is gorgeous, with it taking place in the West Indies and all. And this was when I realized that my teenager self was incredibly wrong and missed out. There was plenty to not like, but I had a bit more fun this time around. The gameplay mechanics were all very similar to Rogue. In fact, exactly like Rogue. Putting footage of Black Flag and Rogue next to each other, I bet you'd have a hard time telling which game is which, since they were both made on the same engine. I didn't have as much fun with Black Flag as I did with Rogue, but there was a certain itch that Black Flag scratched that Rogue didn't. And that's the whole aesthetic of everything. The overall story isn't great, but this game's aesthetics gave me similar vibes to another game that I've played, and that was Uncharted 4, where you play as PlayStation's iconic treasure hunter Nathan Drake, who uncovers the truth of pirate captain Henry Avery's founding of the pirate utopia Libertalia and the location of his buried treasure. But unlike Uncharted 4, where you plunder through the remains of a pirate settlement, in Black Flag you actually play as a pirate that is trying to find his fortune and is founding his own Libertalia. Now, I am not saying in any way that Assassin's Creed Black Flag is better than Uncharted 4, because it's not. It's just cool to play as the pirate, and Edward Kenway is my favorite protagonist out of all of these games, because he isn't affiliated with the Assassin's Brotherhood or the Templars. He's a freaking pirate, an actual rebel, and that's cool. Sure, there are still things like assassin contracts for you to pursue, but being a pirate fits the naval combat more compared to Rogue. Admittedly, I didn't spend as much time on Black Flag as I did with the other games, mostly because I'd like to play it more on my own time and not have to record footage from it. Out of all 6 games, this is the one that I am most excited to return to later. Although I can't say the same for the next 2 games. Assassin's Creed Origins is when Ubisoft took a year-long gap between games after Syndicate and majorly changed the gameplay formula of an Assassin's Creed game, turning it into an open-world action RPG, with a leveling progression system that goes far beyond what Unity and Syndicate did. Clearing out forts, exploring tombs, completing side quests to gain experience points, level up, and earn skill points to spend on a skill tree, hunting animals to collect their skins in order to upgrade your equipment so that you deal more damage and take less damage, and everything feels a lot more streamlined compared to the previous games. Such as when you kill someone, looting bodies is reduced to a single button press rather than holding a button down, and sprinting is done for you automatically rather than holding down the right trigger. You know, pretty much everything you'd expect from a stereotypical open-world RPG, except somehow worse. Exploring the world and grinding for materials and experience points is forced upon you harder in this game compared to Unity and Syndicate. Because if you're too low of a level, everything can grind it to a halt, and this includes the main story, which is a shame because I think the story is actually decent. But it's kinda hard to be invested in the story when the side content becomes a chore for you to complete before you're even a high enough level to continue the story. Which normally doesn't sound so bad, and I have patience. I have the patience to play through Persona 5 Royal 6 times. But the problem is, in Assassin's Creed Origins, leveling up takes a very long time. And the side quests? Take any writing from the main story quests and throw them out the window. It's obvious how poorly written these side quests are, and that they exist as just a way for the player to farm for XP. Oh, you don't like a trailing mission? How about a trailing mission? But instead, the 2 characters are drunk. Ooh, such a fun quest. How about this side quest, where you have to pick up bodies and carry them, or a side quest where you are praying a demon out of a pregnant woman that had the most expressionless face possible when I was making her drink something? The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, a game that I deeply cherish, came out in the same year as Origins. The feeling of exploration and discovery was different in that game because there was always something interesting to do. You could be heading to the next story bit only to look in some direction and think, oh, what is that over there? I should go look and see, maybe I'll get some cool stuff out of that. And even though you can go anywhere and do anything, there's nothing in the game that's stopping you from pursuing the main objective. In Assassin's Creed Origins, you explore the world not because you want to, but because you need to. And that makes the game a weaker open world experience in my opinion. Heck, I have more fun in Skyrim compared to this. And the combat is not much better. It can be challenging and engaging at times, but it is super unsatisfying because of the RPG build that this game utilizes. Regardless if the level between you and enemies are balanced, enemies are huge damage sponges that can take more than a few hits to kill. This kind of combat system is what encourages players to approach using stealth, because doing stealth kills is what kills enemies in one hit, which is what makes sleeping darts the most overpowered tool in the entire game. Hope you have a nice sleep for all eternity. Yeet! Oh, oh, that was great. Your turn. Yee! Except for when you're a lower level than the leader of a camp, in which case stealth kills are pretty much non-existent, because again, damage sponges. For instance, this one fort that had 2 captains and a commander to take out. It had this giant hulk of a man that had way too much health that even a stealth kill with my hidden blade couldn't kill him. And I was the same level that he was. It took me multiple attempts to take him out. But what pissed me off even more is how unassuming this guy was. He was one of the captains, not the commander. The commander of the fort was a level above me, and he was a wimp that died by a stealth kill. So many moments like this pissed me off that I hardly had the patience to continue playing this game. And yet, I kept pushing to see if it would get any better. But it never did. It just kept getting more and more tedious. And the main story can easily be forgotten due to how much side stuff you have to do. I only played until I got to level 25. Origins is the game that I spent the most time on, easily 23 hours. And I doubt I was anywhere near beating it. Now, do not mistake me not enjoying Assassin's Creed Origins for 0 out of 10, I would not recommend. It is a piece of garbage. That is not what I'm saying at all. If you are an addict to open world games and you want an open world game that you can get lost in for 100 hours or more, then this would be the game for you. And that's not even mentioning that the game is gorgeous. I mean, this is the most gorgeous rendition of ancient Egypt that I have ever seen in a video game. If you love Egypt, you would love this game. But it is just not for me. It is boring and repetitive. There is one thing, however, that lingers in my mind. Yep, microtransactions. To buy weapons and cosmetics early. Typical. Wait a second. Time savers? Oh dear. Okay, let's move on to the final game because this involves Odyssey as well. Yup, Odyssey was the last one that I played. Like Syndicate, this game has 2 playable characters, but unlike Syndicate, you can't swap between them at any time. You can only pick one at the start and you're stuck with it throughout your whole playthrough. I went with Cassandra, and after what I experienced, I did not have the patience to start a new save file with Alexios. Game is pretty much built the same way as Origins. Story has a strong opening and is interesting for a good while, but the game encourages you to complete world activities and side quests to level up and get stronger before you continue. Combat involves chipping away at damage sponge enemies. You can spend about 2 hours at a time collecting crafting materials just to upgrade your equipment. You know, everything that made even Origins such a slog fest to begin with. This game feels so much more grindy compared to Origins. It felt like I was farming significantly less XP for doing anything. Of course, there is the option to spend a few more bucks so that you don't have to actually play the game. In Origins and Odyssey, there are the common kinds of microtransactions, such as unlocking weapons and cosmetics early, but the one that sticks out like a sore thumb are the time savers, where you can buy things like crafting materials, in-game currency, map waypoints, but most especially, in Odyssey's case, a boost in gaining experience points and in-game currency. This is the exact same kind of greedy business practice that is used for mobile games. But this isn't a mobile game. This is a full-release, single-player video game for at-home consoles and PC that costs $60 to play the damn thing in the first place. Does no one see the problem with this? And with how brutal the grinding for XP is in Odyssey, it feels as if Ubisoft took out a portion of the XP that you earn from quests and is selling it off as DLC. Now, I technically paid only $7 for Odyssey, so paying an extra $10 for a boost wouldn't impact me very much. But I'm not going to do it, because it is still beyond stupid. To be honest, if I were to compare Assassin's Creed to any kind of food chain, I would easily compare it to fast food. And Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey, I would easily rate on the same level as Arby's. If I were to compare Origins to, say, Arby's classic roast beef sandwich, I would easily compare Odyssey to Arby's half-pound roast beef sandwich, where there is a heck of a lot more meat that you need to digest. And to be honest, a half-pound roast beef sandwich does not sound good to me right now. Even though it is pretty tempting to earn more XP because completing side quests is such a chore, much like in Origins. Pretty much the only interesting thing about the side quests is actually the branching paths for dialogue, which is something that Origins did not have. The dialogue choices that you make can actually change the outcome of a quest. Or they could just boil down to generic good guy option and generic bad guy option, and it doesn't matter which one you pick because the person you're talking to will try to kill you anyway. And yet he will just fail epically. And that was a boss fight. But that's not where most of my frustration came from. The combat was just as grindy and nonsensical as Origins. Either enemies are incredibly difficult because they have too much health, or the AI is so dumb that I can literally run circles around them. That is, until I noticed how enemies ragdoll every time I hit them with a charged attack. And Greece sure does have a lot of cliffs. Pair that with the ragdoll charged attacks and the broken Spartan kick ability, and I have found my greatest weapon that deals more DPS than any melee weapon can only dream of achieving. Allow me to introduce you to my good friend, Gravity. This one is my favorite because he auto-tuned right before I killed him.
Won't last much longer.
But when there are no cliffs, that's when things get pretty frustrating. There was this one fort that sealed the deal for me, and it was after the autosave screwed me over. Every Assassin's Creed game autosaves after you do anything, which was fine because that meant after I completed something, I never have to worry about it ever again. I came across a high-level fort, and it was pretty tough. It took me a few attempts to clear it out. On my winning attempt, I was laser-focused. I haven't felt this much tension at any point during the rest of my playtime. And even a couple of high-level bounty hunters got mixed in. It was some of the most intense combat I ever had out of any of these games. And when I finally killed the last enemy, I exhaled with relief. At that point, it was pretty late, so I exited out of the game and went to sleep. The next day, when I decided to continue, I was at the same fort, and it wasn't completed. The game didn't autosave. I was already pretty frustrated at that point, but that was before I tried attempting it again. I was trying to clear out the enemies one at a time, like usual when stealth wouldn't work, until I suddenly got cornered by every enemy that was within a 5-mile radius.
We did it!
I need you!
And that was when any emotion that I was feeling at the time was replaced with anger. I was not having fun. Video games are supposed to be fun, and I was not having it. That was when I flipped the game off and decided to call it quits after I killed this prick. Once I found the fort that he was hiding in, of course, I decided to clear out all the other enemies first so that they weren't a pain in the ass when I confronted the boss. And they were pretty tough too, until I remembered, oh right, gravity. Alright, that's 1. And that's 2. 2 for 1, alright, I'll take it. And when I got to the boss, of course, he was the toughest damage sponge yet. So I just lured him out of the cave, and of course, gravity happened. How are you still talking? I just killed you. And that was when I immediately turned that game off and switched over to Stardew Valley. Because at least farming in this game is fun. And this game was made by one dude in a cave with a box of scraps. Not a big AAA company that thinks it's a good idea to give boats a stamina meter. What even is this? In the end, these games did give me more fun than I was hoping, but at the same time, it was pretty much what I expected. They aren't terrible, but they are not better than all of these games combined. If you are willing to look past all the cracks and the greedy business practices that the games throw at you, you can find some semblance of fun. Unlike here, I didn't even talk about Odyssey's naval combat in the last segment because it's a much more watered down version compared to Black Flag and Rogue. Imagine the naval combat, but add all the RPG elements and damage sponges. That's the naval combat in Odyssey. It is not fun. But hey, at least it looks cool. And that's one more major thing to mention. Whether or not you find actual enjoyment playing these games, there is one aspect about them that is undeniably good. And that's the aesthetic of everything. I mentioned how gorgeous the West Indies in Black Flag are, but the same goes for everywhere else. The environments in these games are fantastically detailed. You'll see all kinds of hieroglyphs and amazing architecture in Origins. The boats in Odyssey look exactly like the Spartan boats that I see in history books. And then there's the iconic landmarks. From the Eiffel Tower to Big Ben, from the Pyramids of Giza to the Greek Parthenon, everything looks how they should. Actually, here's a fun fact for you. Remember back in 2019 when Notre Dame caught on fire? Ubisoft actually lent the 3D readout of Notre Dame that they used for Unity to help with the reconstruction. And that's one of the best things that Ubisoft has done in the past 5 years. And it makes sense. Notre Dame in Unity is impressively detailed on the outside and the inside. And the soundtracks across all of these games are great. And then there's a little something known as fashion. All the outfits in these games are incredible, especially the different kinds of Spartan armor in Odyssey. And all the assassin outfits for the main characters across these games are all distinct from one another. But I know what I like. You may have already noticed some of the characters in the footage across these games wearing Edward Kenway's outfit from Black Flag. That's because, in my opinion, Edward Kenway has the best assassin outfit. I will give props to Ubisoft for nailing the look of everything because they have clearly done their research. I was going to end this video with how I would rank these games, but that would be kinda pointless, because if I were to rank these games from best to worst, I would be ranking them from oldest to newest. Kinda. Rogue was the best game out of these 6, because like I said, it was much faster to get you into the fun parts. Black Flag had the same amount of fun, but it took forever to get to it. Unity and Syndicate was where I had the most fun with parkour, mostly because the maps were large, contained cities. But aside from the shallow yet flashy combat, the stories were very mid. Origins and Odyssey? That's all I can say. They are impressively gorgeous open worlds that anyone can sink hundreds of hours into, but to me, they were very frustrating and repetitive.
Pitiful end to a pitiful existence.
I lasted for only 13 hours on Odyssey and was nowhere close to finishing it. It tested my patience to the limit. And this is coming from someone whose favorite game of all time is a 120 plus hour long turn-based RPG. And I'd also like to point out that IGN gave this game a 9 out of 10. Wow! To think that this game is up there with the likes of Animal Well, Astrobot, Helldivers 2, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Persona 3 Reload, Uncharted 4, The Witcher 3? Actually, what the hell, IGN? Now, before you berate me, if you've actually watched this far into the video, I did not say any of the games are terrible. They are not F or D tier games. They get a passing grade. I mean, they're okay games. They're not the greatest games ever made. I just don't recommend that you pay the full price for them. Just wait for them to go on sale. I mean, that's what I'm doing with pretty much any of Ubisoft's games, to be honest. Ooh, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is on sale. Let me take a look at this. Okay, 60 to 90 hour long runtime, and it has the same game design as Origins and Odyssey, and yeah, no thanks. Ubisoft is gonna have to pay me to play that. Congratulations if you made it to the end of the video, and this really took a long time to make. Hopefully you found it somewhat entertaining, and if not, then oh well, you can't please everybody. The entire time that I have spent making this video, I have just been internally screaming with anxiety in my head, wondering if people were going to enjoy this video or at least respect my subjective opinion on Assassin's Creed. I bought this entire collection of 6 games for $40, so I thought, what the heck, might as well make a video off of it. No way was I going to pay $200 for the whole collection, because that is just ridiculous. So $40 was pretty much just a steal. This video was actually inspired by another YouTuber. Maybe you know him, maybe you don't. He goes by the name of Nakey Jakey. In his video titled In Defense of the 7 out of 10 Games, he made a statement saying that a critic score does not fully explain what an experience entails and what might appeal to you. And that statement actually spoke to me. That statement is what made me make the final decision to buy that $40 collection, because I have never given a passing glance at Assassin's Creed ever since I was a teenager, and after playing these 6 games, I kinda have a better opinion than I did when I was a teenager. I still don't think the games are great, but I still had more laughs than I thought I would, and I'm actually one of those people where my opinions on games can shift over time, so as I keep taking bites out of these games, maybe sometime in the future I might like Black Flag more than Rogue, who knows. And with that said, Godspeed, Internet, and, don't have a good day, have a great day.